Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. My name's Kelly Geyer, and today we're going to talk about something that I think most of you have experienced firsthand. Organizations that are really good at doing Agile, they've trained people, they adopted the frameworks, they brought in the coaches, somehow they still can't transform. And not even just a little bit. They're failing miserably. But the question is why? And more importantly, what do we do about it? Because I'll tell you right now that the answer is not another methodology, it's not another framework, and it's not simply putting an AI solution in the mix. It's something quite a bit more fundamental than that. So let's get into it. Before we get into the content, I'll just share with you why I'm the right person to be talking about this. I've spent over 20 years inside transformations, not advising from the outside, but in the weeds, working across enterprise organizations spanning 22 countries. I've worked on every kind of transformation you can think of, from SAP to AI to Agile adoption, culture change, operating model redesigns, restructuring. I've seen what works and I've seen what doesn't work. I've created the adaptive capability ecosystem because after 2 decades, I kept seeing the same failure pattern repeat over and over again. And I realized that the problem wasn't the initiatives or even the strategy. It was the organization's fundamental ability to cope with changes. What I do isn't just traditional change management. I help organizations continuously evolve so change doesn't feel like a crisis. Think about your organization right now. How many transformation initiatives are in flight between AI implementation, Agile adoption, digital transformation, culture change, restructuring, downsizing, a new operating model? Is it 1 or 2? Is it 3 or 4, 5? If it's more than 6, you're not alone. And that number is one of the many reasons why we're here today. So while we go through this today, I want you to keep that number in mind. I want to start by explaining something that I think most of you have lived through at least a few times, or if you're like me, a few dozen times or more. First, I want to explain the cycle that I see organizations going through over and over again. And first, they decide we need something different. So they're going to pick a new methodology, a new technology, and they'll choose to invest in this new idea. They'll grab consultants, a vendor, and they'll decide we're going to go for it. Then they launch it. So they kick off the project, they set milestones, they create a project plan, everything's exciting, and the project goes on. And there's a go live or a completion date, and everyone celebrates and declares transformation success, and then they close the project. Then a few months down the road, they watch it fade away. Nothing actually changed. People's old habits return, and adoption drops off. Then, the next thing you know, a new crisis comes, and we repeat the process over again. They decide, we're going to invest, we're going to launch, then we celebrate we did it, and nothing really changes, and over again. It's exhausting. But here's the thing, this isn't a failure in terms of execution. And it's certainly not about the technology, or you picked the wrong vendor, or the wrong framework, or even bad consultants. This is the result of what happens when you try to renovate a broken system. And as you can see from looking here, you can't renovate your way to adaptability. And this is a pattern that you see where you can achieve project success. There was a go live, there was an end date where the milestones were hit and you went live, but still failed to see any measurable business impact. Going back more than 50 years, transformation failure rates have not improved. Sadly, in fact, they're getting worse. Since the 1970s, failure rates with transformations were around 70% and remained there about 50 to 70% until the last couple of years. Now moving to 2023, 88% of all transformations failed to achieve their original ambition. And that's not just technology or agile transformations, that's all transformations. 88% fail to achieve their original ambition. Coming to 2025, with AI and transformation, 95% of enterprise AI solutions are failing to deliver any amount of measurable financial return at all. In fact, MIT's study found that despite $30 to $40 billion in enterprise investment, only 5% have created any significant value whatsoever. And Gartner's research estimated that we're losing about $2.3 trillion a year globally to failed transformation initiatives. And I want to be very clear about something. These failures aren't because the companies are choosing bad technology or using the wrong framework or methodology. Again, it's not an execution problem. This is an adaptability problem. Nobody is kicking off transformations after considering if the organization actually has the capacity or the capability to absorb the change. What they are looking at is, do we have the budget to do this? If we've selected the right vendor, have we created a feasible project plan? Those are the things that typically get looked at. But they aren't asking, can we actually absorb this change? Do we have the people that can adapt in this way? And if not, where are we going to find them, or how are we going to help them adapt? Do we have the capacity and the governance structures in place to sustain what we're putting into place? What does our culture look like? These questions don't typically get asked. And if they do, the answer is usually a guess, and it's not backed up with data. And that's a massive blind spot. Because if you slap some paint on the walls of a building with a weak and crumbling structure and foundation, you can pick the prettiest color in the world, but the cracks are eventually going to start to show through. And organizations are exactly the same. So one of the core insights that I want you to walk away with today from this session is that most organizations are constructed like buildings. There's fixed structures, they're hard to change, the walls are stuck in one spot. When you have to renovate, it's messy and dirty and disgusting. And sometimes people have to completely leave the building in order for the work to get done. And usually you want to focus on just one major project at a time. When you think about your home, you don't want to remodel your kitchen and remodel your bathroom at the same time. Usually it's not a good idea. You want to focus on one area at a time. And eventually the building gets so old and outdated, you need to completely tear it down. Renovating is not the answer anymore. You've got to completely tear it down and start over again. Instead, what if our organization looked more like an ecosystem? And a healthy ecosystem doesn't need to renovate. It just continuously evolves by design. Change is organic and natural. An ecosystem adapts around disruption without shutting it down. And multiple things can be happening at the same time. You can have multiple changes going on simultaneously without destroying the ecosystem. And every time there is a change, the organization or ecosystem in this case becomes stronger instead of weaker. So we keep trying to renovate old buildings, but you can't, as I said, you can't renovate your way to adaptability. What we need is to cultivate ecosystems. So read this to yourself for a moment. Organizations treat transformation as a series of projects instead of cultivating the capability to evolve continuously. A project has a beginning and an end. You staff it, you fund it, you hit go live, and then you close it. and the project closes. But the capability to adapt is very different. It gets integrated into how the organization functions. It outlasts any single initiative. And the powerful thing is it compounds over time. Each time your organization navigates change well, it becomes better at navigating the next one. And right now, most organizations are starting from zero every single time. Imagine what it would mean to start from strength instead. I want to make it concrete with what's happening right now. There was a manufacturing COO that told MIT researchers in 2025 that despite all the AI activity, nothing fundamental had shifted in their organization and in their operations. It's not an unusual perspective. This is pretty much the experience that most organizations are seeing at the moment. 61% of senior leaders say that they're under more pressure to prove AI return on investment than 1 year ago. And 53% of investors expect to see a return within 6 months. 6 months is not that long. Meanwhile, the average return on investment timeline for these type of investments is over 4 years. That gap between investor expectation and organizational reality is going to cause quite a lot of pain, and a lot of companies are already feeling it. 42% of organizations abandon at least one AI initiative in 2025. That's up from 17% from the year before. And none of it's about AI technology. The technology works. The organizations just aren't ready to absorb it. So there are two distinct sides of this when we're looking at why these things keep failing, why Agile transformation's failing, why digital transformation is failing, why AI transformation is failing. And you need to understand both sides before you can fix either of them. So on the one side, this is about your people. Can they absorb the ongoing changes that are happening? Can they stay effective when there's multiple things going on and things are changing all around them? Can they function when the plan changes consistently and regularly? Are your leaders modeling this for their teams? Are they modeling resilience? And are they helping others build the capacity to be resilient? Then on the other side of this is the organization. Can your organization sense what's coming before it hits them like a truck? Can it coordinate multiple changes at the same time? Does it build internal capability, not just buy it from external consultants? And are you measuring for adoption, or are you aiming just for go live dates? The bigger problem is that you can't fix one without the other. And I'll show you exactly what happens when you try. The combination of individual resilience and organizational adaptability, or the absence of either, creates a very predictable outcome. When you take non-resilient people and put them in an organization that's not adaptable, you have crisis and chaos. Every change is an emergency, and you have a lot of firefighting going on. People shut down and nothing sticks. When you take people who are not resilient, but you put them in an organization that's incredibly adaptable, you end up with an organization that can move more quickly than people can. And the one that I see the most often is that you have resilient people. You have the right people who can adapt quickly. And when the market changes, they can adapt. But you have them in an organization that is solid and static and does not adapt very easily. And this is where you see a lot of burnout happening. But when you create kind of the dream team and you have resilient people in an organization that is adaptive, this is when you can create an environment that evolves continuously. So think about where your organization is at the moment, and how do you know that that's where you're there? What are the signs that you're seeing? So let's dive into that left side from the previous slide, the individual resilience to change. I developed an assessment many years ago that evaluates personal resilience across 4 dimensions that determine how well people navigate ongoing change. And luckily for me, it's been put on comparative agility, so it's available to everyone now. And I can tell you that most organizations and leaders are not thinking about this when they're managing a transformation or even think about launching a transformation. And it's one of the biggest determining factors for success or failure. And these 4 dimensions that we'll look at are not soft skills. These are measurable and they're coachable capabilities. The first one is growth, mindset, and learning. Not are you open to learning, because I think a lot of people are really open to learning, but then what do you do with that once you've learned it? Do you actually take what you've learned and put it into practice? Or does kind of the chaos of work and life drown it out? Then we look at self-management under pressure. This is about sustained performance, not sprinting. So can you function over time in ongoing uncertainty? Because big transformations are not a sprint. These are run over quarters or years. Then we look at adaptability and agility. When the plan changes, and it will, do you adapt or do you get completely derailed for days or weeks? Then we look at resilience and leadership influence in the 4th dimension. Now, do you model this for others? If you're fairly resilient, do you exhibit this behavior, or does your own stress become your team's stress? The change resilience assessment that's now on comparative agility measures all 4 of these dimensions and gives you personalized strategies on how to improve. And then you can add those to your personal improvement backlog and track your progress over time. The assessment takes 5 minutes. I've taken it myself, and the results showed me things about my own patterns that I wasn't aware of. I will share them with you right now, my actual results on comparative agility. So this shows I'm relatively resilient, which that was not a surprise to me. There's definitely some room for improvement there under self-management under pressure. And so you can see I added one of these tips to my personal improvement backlog to improve this area of self-management under pressure. So before reacting to something, when I get new information or something's going to change and I'm already at a heightened level of stress, I just take 5 deep breaths and I ask, what's the most useful thing I can do right now? And I practice this with kind of smaller situations so that it becomes a habit before a major crisis hits. And this is what the personal change resilience assessment looks like in comparative agility. So let's give another concrete example of why individual data matters. I was working with a mid-size retailer and we ran this assessment with employees, and the data came back showing that 70% of managers and 87% of the employees scored relatively low on self-management under pressure. So that they were 3 or lower in self-management under pressure. The leadership team obviously thought, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with our people. We need to launch some initiatives. We need a mediation app that's available to all employees. We'll run some resilience workshops. We'll get someone to come in and do yoga in the office, which none of those are bad ideas. But unless you're addressing the root cause, nothing much is going to improve. Those scores on the change resilience assessment are not going to move. So what we really found was that the root cause was that the organization was constantly going through transformations. They had 9 huge transformations going at the same time, and they were way over capacity. It wasn't the people that were broken. It was the system that was broken. And this is critical to understand. So while individual resilience data is valuable, it doesn't tell you the whole story. You need to look at both sides. So now let's look at that other side. This is where most organizations have their biggest blind spot, and this is where the adaptive capability assessment lives. It's over 6 dimensions. Each one is a potential point of failure for an organization. Each one is measurable, and what I've seen after running this assessment with nearly 100 organizations is that they almost never score consistently across all 6 dimensions. They'll have pockets of strength where they're doing really well, and they'll have areas where there's room for improvement. And those vulnerabilities, those areas for improvement, are exactly where you will see transformations fail. So let's take a deeper dive into what each of those dimensions look like. The first one is assessment and sensing. Before you launch a major change, does your organization genuinely assess whether you have the capacity and the capability to absorb it? Not just the budget, not just the head count, but really, does your organization have the time, the focus, and the organizational bandwidth to handle a change before it hits you like a truck? The second dimension is infrastructure and governance. Do you coordinate changes across the enterprise, or is it ad hoc every single time? Capability building is the third dimension. When the consultants leave, have they transferred that knowledge, or does the capability leave with them? Are you building the internal expertise, or are you permanently outsourcing or renting your change management muscle? The fourth dimension is culture and behavior. What does your promotion system actually reward? If flexibility and learning are valued, but predictability and delivery get promoted and recognized, you have a gap in the culture that you need versus the culture that you have. The fifth dimension is leadership and sponsorship. Are your leaders equipped to lead through ambiguity? Are they comfortable with the unknown? Or do they show up for the kickoff and then disappear when things get hard, when people have questions? And the final sixth dimension is execution and sustainment. Do you measure people, whether people are working differently? Or are you measuring just a go live? Did we go live? Check. Yes, it's success. Or are you actually measuring business impact and whether people have changed behaviors and are working differently? So thinking back, if you're scoring honestly, each of these roughly, if you scored between a 1 and a 5, 5 being we're excellent at this and a 1 being no, we never do it. If you roughly look at these and you think, well, we're a 3 or lower in any of these areas, this is a huge indicator of where a transformation might fail. Similar to the change resilience assessment that's on comparative agility, this new, relatively new adaptability assessment is now on comparative agility. And this is just a sample of what the results look like after you've done the assessment. It's 24 questions, it doesn't take very long, and you get a maturity assessment that scores where you are in each of those 6 dimensions. These are just 2 of the views that are available to you, and you can see with kind of the radial view, you also get an idea of where you are benchmarked compared to others across the industry that you're in. This is what a real organizational profile looks like also. So before I was able to put this lovely assessment on comparative agility, I ran these on my own using Excel and a few other tools. And a typical organization, as I stated, they usually have areas where they're doing quite well. So this organization, their culture and behavior was actually pretty good. And they were doing very well. Whereas they could use a little bit of work with infrastructure and governance. So their issue was that anytime someone had an idea about something to change, it got kicked off. And there was little to no thought process or governance around, can the organization sustain this? Can our people cope with this change? Do we have the skills that we need in order to do this? So, and here's why this information matters. You can have a fantastic culture, and you can have very resilient people. But if you have, as we stated before, 9 initiatives or 6 or more initiatives going on all at the same time, and they're all colliding and there's no governance, no amount of good culture is going to save you. And you can have really committed leadership. Their leadership also scored quite high at a 3.0. The leaders were showing up, but maybe not consistently. If every time the project ends, the expertise walks out the door, then you're starting from 0 every single time. So knowing where these gaps exist between where the organization is already mature and where there's opportunity for improvement is critical. The points of less maturity are what can kill a transformation before it even gets started. When I do the full adaptive capability diagnostic with an organization, this profile is what we build together. So not only do I use the quantitative assessment with 24 different questions, but I also do a deeper dive with stakeholder interviews, reviewing documentation, and doing some observation. Here is the measurement problem in plain sight. The column on the left is what most Agile coaches or project managers or change managers are looking at when something is trying to change in an organization. They are looking at velocity. Are teams doing ceremonies? Are we doing training? Do we have a go live date? Are the milestones being hit? These are all valid in terms of project management, but they measure execution against a plan. They don't measure at all the capability to change. Now on the right column is what actually determines whether you truly transformed or not. Can people absorb this ongoing change? Do they stay effective under pressure? Can they lead others through uncertainty? Can the organization see what's coming before it hits them? Or is everything reactive? Can they be proactive? Can you run simultaneous changes at the same time? And is adaptation actually measured? So with this adaptive capability assessment, we make a measurement, we implement some changes to create a more adaptive organization, and then we reassess and make sure that their maturity is improving over time. Without knowing these aspects of an organization, you're really flying blind. And here's the practical application of everything that we've covered today so far. Before you launch your next transformation, diagnose first. If you launch AI before you've assessed your governance readiness, your infrastructure, and governance dimension, what typically is going to happen? The initiative collides with 3 other ongoing transformation projects. Nobody coordinates with each other, and the pilot delivers technically, but then gets abandoned because nobody sustains it and it hasn't achieved any measurable business outcomes. If you launch an Agile transformation without first understanding your culture gap, so why your promotion system still rewards predictability over adaptation, the ceremonies will happen. You'll be doing Agile. But then 6 months later, everyone will be going through the same motions and the organization has not actually changed at all. If you implement an ERP system without a plan to build the internal expertise, the consultants leave and the capability leaves with them. So what you first need to do is run these 2 assessments, because you cannot fix what you don't measure and what you don't understand. So diagnose first, nurture the ecosystem, then plant the seeds for success. This is how you stop failing, because you can't fix what you aren't aware of. This isn't a tweak to how to manage change programs. This is a different model entirely. From managing discrete projects to cultivating continuous capability, from treating change as an event to treating adaptation as organizational DNA, from buying transformation to growing the capacity from within your organization, from renovating structures to nurturing ecosystems, from measuring project go-live dates or completion to measuring actual adaptation and how you can adapt as an organization. None of this is semantic. Each one represents a real operational difference. When you manage discrete projects, every transformation starts from zero. When you cultivate capability, they build on each other and you're stronger over time. When you treat change as an event, it's always a crisis and has the probability of failing. When adaptation is part of your DNA, this is just how you work. High-performing organizations have already made this shift. The organizations I see that are struggling the most are still firmly in the left-hand column. Not because their people are incapable, not because their system is set up incorrectly, but because they're not set up as an ecosystem that can evolve continuously. So what does it look like when an organization is successful at becoming adaptable? Let's paint a picture. I worked with a healthcare organization that took 18 months to build their adaptive capability before they launched their AI initiative. They measured first, they fixed their governance, they built their internal expertise and leadership capabilities, they changed how they recognized and promoted people. When they launched, it worked. And it wasn't because their AI technology was different. It was because the organization was ready to absorb it. That's the version of success most organizations have never experienced. And not because it's out of reach, but because they keep skipping the foundational work and going straight to the renovation part. And this is what I want for every organization in this session. Not the heroic transformation story where everyone suffered for 3 years, or there was a launch and then it got canceled and then they had to relaunch an initiative where it sort of worked. But I want to see the version where transformation becomes normal, where adaptation is just how you operate. So what do you do now? Let's get practical. Step 1 is to diagnose. Don't guess. Don't assume. Just measure both sides. Use the change resilience assessment for individuals and leaders, and use the adaptive capability assessment for your organization. Find out where those gaps actually are before your next initiative. Step 2 is to cultivate. Nurture that ecosystem. Fix the governance gaps. Develop the internal expertise, create the culture conditions for adaptation, and don't launch your next transformation until you've built the foundation to support it. Step 3 is to evolve. All of us in the Agile community know this as continuous improvement. So evolve, launch those initiatives, but launch based off of what your diagnostic tells you your organization can actually absorb, not based on what you wish you could handle. And when you do, measure whether you actually got better at transforming. That's really the metric that you want to look at. And this sequence, when you do this repeatedly, is what breaks the failure cycle. Everything we've covered today comes down to this. We used to ask, how do we manage this transformation or initiative? That's a renovation question. How do we get through this project? How do we get back to normal? But the new question is, how do we become an organization where transformation is normal, where adaptation is built in, where change doesn't require a crisis response? You're not trying to survive the next initiative. You're trying to create an organization that's genuinely better at navigating change than it was yesterday. Adaptability is the only competitive advantage that you can't buy, you can't copy it, and you can't outsource it. But it absolutely can be cultivated from within. So there's two very specific things that you can do now. Start with yourself and your team. Take the change resilience assessment on comparative agility. It only takes a few minutes, and the results are genuinely useful. Even for me, who took it, and I'm a very adaptable person, I'm very resilient to change, I still got something out of it where I could include into my personal improvement backlog to make some changes and build my resilience muscles. And the results are genuinely surprising sometimes, and it's not just a score, but you get specific strategies for your personal development areas. Then, to understand your organization's adaptive capability, take the quick assessment that's on comparative agility. It's only 24 questions, and most people can get through it in about 10 minutes. It measures all 6 dimensions and identifies exactly where your transformation is likely to fail. If you score below 3 on any of those dimensions, if in any of the 6 dimensions for the adaptive capability assessment, this is where you want to contact me. I run the adaptive capability full diagnostic. It's a 3-phase assessment that gives you real evidence-based profile across all 6 dimensions. So I want to have that conversation with you before you launch your next initiative. I run the diagnostic, like I mentioned, with complete stakeholder interviews, documentation review, observation. The online assessment is valuable. It tells you exactly where you are with adaptive maturity. My diagnostic tells you why and how to improve. Both of these are critical first steps because in 2026, launching a major transformation without first assessing whether you actually have the capability to take it on is asking to find out the hard way what transformation failure looks like. I want to leave you with this. Stop buying transformation. Start cultivating adaptability. Build the ecosystem, and then the transformation happens naturally, not as a crisis, not as a renovation, but just as how your organization operates. Thank you for your time today. I'll be here for live Q&A right after this recording plays, and I am genuinely looking forward to your questions. See you there.